Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, we're taking a look at GoCollect's hottest trending comics for the week of May 21st. Now, for those who don't know, GoCollect puts out weekly articles. They analyze the hottest selling comic books based on volume of sales and set an increase in movement in the market. So think of these 5 books as the most liquid this past week. But before I get into it, if you guys could drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, helps support the channel doing things, I appreciate it. But let's get into this article here today. Of course, I will put a link to the article in the description if you guys want to do your own reading. But coming in here at the number 5 spot is a very cool book to see, one that sort of makes sense as to having the delayed effect of why it's showing up on the list this week. But of course, we're talking about Fantastic Four number 50, new to the list this week, now sitting in the 79th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, it's the book that came out in 1966, written by Stan Lee and drawn by Jack Kirby. That would be the 3rd appearance of the Silver Surfer, 2nd appearance of Galactus, or 2nd full appearance of Galactus, and would be the 3rd book in the Silver Surfer Galactus trilogy. Now, as I'm sure you guys know, Fantastic Four 48 is sort of the go-to book for Silver Surfer, known as his first actual appearance. And then you have 49. You know, once you own 48 and 49, it kind of feels like you always need to fill out your trilogy and own 50 as well, since they're all a part of one bigger storyline. And that's really why I think that this book is getting hot this week, because, you know, we've recently had rumors about Silver Surfer and Galactus possibly showing up in the Fantastic Four film. There's been a lot of conversation around casting for Fantastic Four. There's been rumors about castings for Galactus and who's going to be playing Silver Surfer. So we saw an increase in movement for a lot of the FF48s and 49s. And typically when stuff like that happens, you see a lot of delayed effects into other books in the market. You know, once people start flocking to 48 and 49, they remember, oh, Silver Surfer 1 is a cool cover. Oh, Fantastic Four 50 is a cool cover. Oh, Fantastic Four 72 is a cool cover. And then you start to get, you know, trickle over and, you know, residual effect into some of these books. So it makes sense that coming off of the heels of those rumors that happened, you know, some weeks back, now we're starting to get eyeballs onto FF50, and that's probably one of the reasons why this book is moving this week. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. Census has it at 3,660 universal copies. 9/8 only have 3 on the census. I imagine that this is a very tough book to get in that 9/8 grade with that all brown border. I mean, a lot of room for spine ticks on that one. But let's take a look at the 8.5s here. 156 on the census. Fair market value 2,600, although 30-day moving is 1860. So, you know, like a lot of other books, we know what the charts look like at this point. Things shot up way high in 2021, had their pullback, had their correction, still floating above that of the 2020 price. Let's go down here to the mid-grade 6.0s coming in here at 30-day moving for 414. And then you can see all the way down here, 3.0s coming in here, 30-day moving 300. So you can see a lot of price consolidation and compression between the 3.0 to the 6.0, which is something that, you know, of course, we've talked about on the channel many times before, where, you know, anytime you can have a flaw within this window is going to cause a big spread in the desirability of the book. And something I also want to discuss is the idea of the auction price versus the fixed price, where you see here an auction for a 6.0 on eBay went for $312, but then a fixed price on eBay went for $529. So significantly higher to, you know, buy it now versus the auction price. And that's something I think that we need to kind of start talking about with our understanding of values of comics, where we have the auction floor level, but then we have the demand level and the convenience factor of people who just want it then, there, and now. Then down here at the bottom, you know, not going to see it slabbed at that low grade, but when you go into eBay looking for raw copies, typically they're still going to set you back around that $150 to $200 range, depending on the deal and depending on the grade. All right, let's go on now to the 4th hottest trending comic of the week. And the 4th hottest trending comic of the week is another cool one that is good to see back on the list. A very fun book to own. This one right here is Fantastic Four Annual number 6, new to the list this week, now sitting in the 71st slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, it's the book that came out in 1968, written by Stan Lee, that would feature the first appearance of Franklin Richards, but also the first appearance of the villain character known as Annihilus. We just are coming off of the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 movie. You know, people are looking at the new Guardians of the Galaxy team. They're thinking that, hey, Nova's going to make a part of that. Maybe Silver Surfer is going to be a part of that team. Hey, maybe this is all leading to Annihilation Conquest. That's how the speculator mind of the market works. And people, you know, connect 2 + 2 = 4, and then they times it by 100, and they go all the way to the end, where now they're thinking, looks like Annihilus is back on the menu, boys. So a lot of people been jumping on this book over the course of this last week or so, and people are really really starting to get excited about it. Now, of course, it feels like that's still going to be a long ways away. I mean, we have to get to Fantastic Four, just the movie itself. We got to bring in Silver Surfer. We haven't even brought in Nova yet. So when is that actually going to happen? But it does feel like a good bet that eventually we are going to be leading to Annihilation Conquest. And when that eventually happens, it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens with this book. But as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. Census has it at 2,581 universal copies, only 9.8s. That makes a lot of sense. It's a square-bound book. Very hard to get this one in high grade. 9.4s have 31 in the census. There actually was a 30-day sale here at the $8,000 range. That's actually a pretty monstrous sale for this book. In fact, that actually might be the record in grade. It is the record in grade. So very interesting to see that someone did a $8,000 buy it now eBay fixed price, considering that just a couple months ago on Heritage Auctions, you could see that it sold for $4,080, and then the time before that it sold for $3,240. So again, the difference between the auction price and the fixed priced the buy it now is vastly, vastly different. Something that I wanted to talk about more on the channel later on. And then at the low grade, 1968 book, not going to always see it slab down there, but when you go into eBay looking for raw copies, typically you can now see them being sold around that $100 to $150 range, depending on the deal and depending on the grade. All right, let's move on now to the third hottest trending comic of the week. And the third hottest trending comic of the week is one that is very, very controversial, one that is interesting to talk about. Of course, we're talking about XXXXXXX. Okay, that's not the actual name of the book. Of course, Go Collect forgot to put in the name of the book, but we're talking about XMen Annual number 14, first cameo appearance of Gambit. Does that trigger anyone that I say that it's the first cameo appearance of Gambit? Well, we're going to talk about that in the second. But this book, of course, is up 15 spots, now sitting kind of in the mid-range of the top 100. But of course, like I said, what is the significance of this? This is a book that came out in 1990, written by Chris Claremont, that would feature the first full appearance of Gambit, first real appearance of Gambit, first cameo appearance of Gambit, something that is related to the Gambit character. Now, we've talked about this book on the channel before, and it feels like this one is actually starting to get a little bit of, heat in the market, or I should say that a lot of people are starting to maybe go on to the side of XMen Annual number 14. This was a book that I think was intended to come after 266, chronologically in the story, but this one actually did hit the shelves first. And so a lot of people talk about this one being the actual first appearance of Gambit compared to 266. I mean, he is in this book in multiple panels. He does actually have lines of dialogue. I just think that, at the time it was sort of a printing issue, but, comic book collectors like to talk about which book hit the shelves first. It's not about which book was intended to be first, which book chronologically in the story is first. Comic collectors are thinking which one hit the shelves first, and I think there's no denying that this one actually did hit the shelves first. But let me know in the comments what you think. Are you guys on XMen Annual 14's team or XMen 266 team? I still think that the cover of 266 is going to be the reason why most collectors are going to go after that one. But as we dig into the numbers for XMen Annual 14, let's take a look at some of the values here. 5,375 universal copies. I think that that's been a number that has been increasing recently due to the fact that a lot of people are looking to this book. 9.9s actually have 6 on the census. Those are actually really, really interesting. 9.8s have 1,365, so quite a lot. And you can see the 30-day moving for that is 220, which I thought that this was really interesting because this 30-day moving average for a 9.8 is actually starting to rival the value for XMen 266 9.6. So would you rather have a 9.8 of XMen Annual 14 or a 9.6 of XMen 266? I think that's where it starts to get pretty interesting overall. Then, of course, outside of the 9.8s, the book drops down quite fast down here. $92 for the 9.6, $50 for a 9.2. Of course, you're not going to see it slabbed at the low grade, but when you go into eBay looking for raw copies, you can find them being sold around that $25 to $50 range, depending on the deal and depending on the grade. All right, let's go on now to the second hottest trending comic of the week. And the second hottest trending comic of the week is a big boy, a classic, another controversial appearance book here. We're, of course, talking about Incredible Hulk number 181, up 33 spots, now sitting in the 18th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, it's the book that came out in 1974, written by Len Wein, that would feature the first full appearance of the character known as Wolverine. Now, I'm not going to belabor the whole first appearance appearance, which one came first, blah, 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 180 versus 181 conversation. Although, like I said, recently I've come into contact with 180, so, for what it's worth, I think 180 is the better book. But there are still a lot of comic book collectors that like 181, of course. And I think one of the reasons why this book is starting to hit the list is that this is finally one that I think has capitulated back down to its trend line. I mean, I've been doing the indexes, I've been looking at this book, and 181 has, has been pretty sticky. As far as the trend line is concerned, it's held up pretty high above its floor level, or where I would think that the floor level would reset to. And finally, in the last, week or so, we're starting to see this book, come back in line to the trend. And I think as soon as this book has fallen in the trend, that's when you're going to see a lot of people buying it. There's now a lot of options, especially on, places like eBay and stuff, where you can find decent deals. You can find this book at auction at a price that is, respectable. And I think that that's where you're seeing a sudden increase in movement in the market. Of course, we all know Wolverine, Hugh Jackman, is going to be returning. We all think that he's going to have a big role in Deadpool and maybe Secret Wars. We all think that, Wolverine eventually is going to come to the MCU, and this book has a long future ahead of itself. But as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. Census has it at 13,406, so quite a few copies out there, although there's only one 9.9. That's going to be one that's going to be crazy when that goes on sale, if it ever does. 9.8s have 141 in the census, fair market value 78,000, 90-day moving 75,000, a big correction from where this was going at one point, selling at the $134,000 range. Definitely got overinflated at that high end, especially since there's 141 out there on the census. But let's jump down here to the 7.0 range. Let's talk about some of this capitulation I was talking about. 7.0s have 1,116 on the census, 30-day moving $4,655. And you can see that this is a book, again, it was holding up there. It was hanging above its level. It was really, really fighting it off. Even, late in 2022 and early January of 2023, it was at that $5,000 price point, still a little bit too high overall. And finally, it's kind of capitulated back down to, around the $4,285, which, as you guys can see, is, again, slightly above that 2020 price, where in November of 2020, it was at the $4,000 range. Now it's kind of selling at auction around $4,400. So a lot of people are thinking, hey, that's not too bad overall. But again, this is something that we got to talk more about, the fixed price versus the auction price and the difference that we're seeing at that level. Similarly here at the 4.0 range, kind of in this low grade area, you can see the 4.0s have 569 on the census, 30-day moving is 2732. And again, another book that finally has kind of reset down to the trend line. We're back in 2020, it was a $2,000, $2,200 book, and now it's kind of going for around that, $2,600, $2,700 level. A lot of people thinking, hey, that's a price that I feel comfortable spending, especially since this is a book that at one point, even at the 4.0 range, was hitting that $4,000 price point. And then down here at the low grade, you will see the book slab from time to time, but even at that low grade, you're still gonna have a hard time finding this book under the $2,000 price point. All right, let's move on now to the hottest trending comic of the week. And the hottest trending comic of the week is a very cool one to see on the list, one that is, something that we probably need to talk a little more about, and that is the cartoon books. But of course, we're talking about Transformers #1, new to the list this week, shooting up all the way to the 15th spot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, it's the book that came out in 1984, written by Bill Mantlo, that would feature the first appearance of the Transformers. Now, I'm sure you guys are familiar with this book. Of course, we all loved Transformers growing up, and we are about to get the new Transformers movie, The Rise of the Beasts, I believe that it is called, and that's brought a lot of market attention back onto Transformers books, Transformers IP, toys, things of that nature. And people are starting to think, that Beast Wars movie actually looks pretty cool. And I'm definitely somebody that grew up watching Beast Wars, and I really, really enjoyed that cartoon. So I'm actually very hopeful that the Beast Wars movie, or I should call it Rise of the Beast, is actually going to be pretty good, although some of the pre-reviews have not been so positive. Why should I expect it to be good? I mean, we all know, guys, it's a Transformers movie. I mean, how good can it actually possibly be? But, a lot of people in the market thinking that Transformers 1 is still a book to own, is still a book to pick up. And, based on all the corrections and the price price consolidation, people are thinking that maybe now is a good time to buy back into this book. But let's dig into the numbers and take a look at it and see if that is actually the case. Census has it at 5,634 universal copies. 99s actually have 4 on the census, although we don't talk about those because there hasn't been recent sales. 98s have 606 on the census. Fair market value is 1,600. 30-day moving is 1,375. So this is kind of an interesting one. While, there's not a ton of 98s, I mean, 606 isn't too many. I mean, it's only a 10% 9.8 rate, which I would say is pretty low for a Copper Age book. But you can see that this is one that, really got so overinflated and then had a huge pullback, huge correction to now where it sells around this $1,375 level. I still think that might be a little bit high. If I go back to the 2020 price, I can see this going at 860, 700, 600, kind of in the mid 2020 range. And now that we're, at 1375, I mean, based on the models that we've been talking about, I would feel more comfortable getting this book around the 1,100, 1,200 price point. That's just my personal opinion based on where it is. But, we are still seeing a lot of demand, just because that's, what this book in theory should cost doesn't mean that that's actually going to ever be what you can actually get it for. Because, 9.8s, again, are very, very desirable. People want, the perfect copies. And, for this book, it's not all that common, relatively speaking. Then, of course, 9.6 here, 1,142 on the census, fair market value 400, 30-day moving 349. So the price really drops off at the 9.6 level. Then, of course, 1984 book. Not going to see it slabbed at the low grade. But when you go into eBay looking for raw copies, typically they sell around that $75 to $100 to maybe $150 level, depending on the deal and depending on the grade that you can find for yourself. Anyways, that's all I got for this video. Those were Go Collect's hottest trending comics of the week. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys have any of these books? Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content. See you all in the next video.